Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. Got to talk about AOC. Got an update on the AOC. So yesterday we talked about her video where she told the story of how she almost died at the Capitol. We had a couple points yesterday, very quickly. A normal story arc goes something like this. It says, I felt this in the moment. Whew. It wasn't that. Thank you, Officer Johnson, for saving my life. Okay, that's a normal story arc. For her, it's, I thought it was a rioter yelling, where is she, where is she? Whew. It wasn't. It was a police officer. Thank you, officer, for saving my life. That's how the story should have gone. Her story was, I thought it was this terrible thing. I thought it was. I'm still acting like it was. And Officer Johnson, you're a real jerk. You know that? Her complaint was that the officer yelled. He was mean. He didn't have a partner with him. He didn't identify himself as Capitol Hill Police. He did not escort her to a safer location. He only told her where to go. And we said yesterday, I said, I hope we can one day hear from the officer who can give his side and say, oh, I wasn't yelling. I mean, it was quite a moment. I was speaking sternly, and I did say Capitol Hill Police. She may not have heard it. And I knew where I was sending them. I knew it was a secure place and a safe place to go. And I couldn't escort her because I had other offices that I had to clear with other congresspeople in them. So I couldn't leave them to and she was with a group, so it was fine. Right? But no one in the media is even asking to hear his side of the story because, well, victim's gonna victim, right? So we're just gonna wallow in that. And that was one of my points yesterday, is usually if you're in a traumatic moment like that, a good therapist will try to bring you out of it, like affirm the feeling, but then bring you out of it into reality. But she, and then the left in general, wallows in these moments. So another point I made was that in her video, she said she was a sexual assault survivor. And I'm not saying that she did and said that to be manipulative, but it will be used to manipulate. Because now if you ever criticize anything that AOS does or says about anything ever, a Green New Deal, whatever, no matter what you say about AOC, now, oh, Slater, you feel good about yourself bullying a sexual assault survivor? Wow, Slater, that's a new low, even for you. I'll be that kind. So now she's got this veil of protection. I bring that up because the latest is her office is not in the Capitol building. Her office is in the Cannon office building, which is a part of the Capitol complex. But here, look, you can see the aerial map here. The Capitol, like where all the rioting took place, like the main gathering of all the pictures you've seen, is on the western side of the Capitol building, right? So the left-hand side of the Capitol building. And most of the people were in the northwest side of that. And her office is on the southeast side across the street, right? Now, I don't know what the scene was outside the Cannon office building, but that's my point. It doesn't matter, right? It's just one big movie in her head and in our head. We think we know what it was like to be even in the Capitol building. I mean, none of us were there, but we've seen enough cell phone footage by now that we kind of get the vibe of it. So we just assumed the worst of that on AOC and we're outside her office. But that's not what it was. What was it like inside the Cannon office building? I don't know. But if you're on the left, you don't care. Because you're just living in that moment of AOC's greatest fear where she thought she was going to die. And you will live there and stay there forever in that moment. And you'll never transition into, whew, thank goodness it wasn't that. So what really happened with AOC? With the media we have today, we'll never know. We'll never know the truth. But the story will live on. The story will live on and wallow and fester and grow, as our memories often do with traumatic events. Throw on that, ones that can be used for political gain, right? But we all know that. We all have stories where something happened or almost happened and it builds and builds and builds and builds and every year. I remember my swim coach told me, the further away from, I swam at college, the further away from graduation you get, the faster you were. right? So if your best time in the 100 free was 50 seconds in college, by the time you get in your 30s or 40s, you were going 48, right? Same thing here. The more this wallows and festers, the worse and worse it's going to get, because no one will ever dare question anything about it. Because if you do, you're just as bad as the rapist. You're the patriarchy. If you question anything about how she felt, you're denying her emotions. You're sexually assaulting her and all women all over again. Don't ask questions. Don't ask for details. Don't ask for the truth. Just accept her lived experience and her feelings. And whatever you do, don't ask the police officer's opinion on what happened. AOC has spoken. That's the latest. All right, moving on. Also yesterday we talked about LA Unified, Los Angeles School District, and other districts across California, and certainly the country, and how the Black History Month, February's Black History Month has turned into Black Lives Matter Month. And this week in particular is the Black Lives Matter at School Week of Action. Please go to mikeslater.locals.com. We have all the documents, all the curriculum from the LA Unified website, all the books, all the YouTube videos that they're making your kids watch. It is astounding what they're making elementary school kids watch about transgenderism and queer affirming. Again, mikeslater.locals.com. It's all right there. Wednesday was trans affirming and queer affirming day. Someone sent me a friend of mine sent me a text last night of their 12-year-old, I think, watching a video of Black excellence. Right, Black excellence. This is very different than let's learn about the Tuskegee Airmen. You right? Now, I don't do it all again, but Black History Month itself was a little weird and odd because it's like, oh, Frederick Douglass is just American history. Why do we have to relegate the Tuskegee Airmen and Frederick Douglass and all these, and Booker T. Washington, all these amazing Black people into a month, right? It's just history, right? But that just was the seed of what we're seeing right now. We are in the midst of a race separatist movement. Not from the white supremacists, not from the Klan, although they would also support this. They do also support this. But from the left, from the Black Lives Matter people. And we have to stop it. For the sake of our country, we have to stop it. This is Black Panther, Nation of Islam stuff, just marketed better and embraced by schools and fed to your kids of all ages, 5-year-olds, pre-K. We have to reject this and embrace. Well, there's a bunch of options, right? But theory of enchantment, Chloe Valderay's theory of enchantment is one very good replacement for what we're embracing as a culture today, your schools and businesses. And the very short of her thing is, what are the things we have in common? It's like brilliant. Stop with the diversity fetish. Focus on the things we have in common, the things that unite us. The similarities of the human experience, regardless of the amount of melanin that you happen to have in your skin. Pick a thing, pick any aspect of the human experience. Disappointment. Okay? A group of people, I don't care what they look like, you get a group of people around, and let's talk about a time that you felt disappointment. Let's talk about a time you felt joy, true, not happiness, true unadulterated joy. Excuse me. Let's read some books. Let's read a book, kids, written 2,000 years ago, where the main character felt disappointment and then did something and now experienced joy, right? Let's read a book from China and a book from America about that exact same human experience. Because that's what it is, and that's what we are, humans. You want to overcome these fake racial battles? You want to overcome it once and for all? No? Okay, fine. If you don't, that's fine. If you don't, then keep talking about how all white people are racist, and let's celebrate queer, Black, transsexuals. If you go to the website, mikeslater.locals.com, one of the activities for elementary school kids is a coloring book. And one of the pages is all the pages are weird things. And then it says, it'll have like quotes from different activists. Bonkers. So if you ask your kids, what'd you do in school today? They'll be like, oh, we colored. And you don't know that they had a quote from a self-described queer, black, transgender feminist, right? So if you don't want to get over this racial stuff, then just keep doing this. And we'll fast forward a couple years of just pumping this into our kids' brains, and then we'll all wonder why we're not united like we used to be. Keep talking about black families and our housing and being unapologetically black. That's Friday. Friday is unapologetically black day. You keep doing that if you want tribes to solidify and hatred and suspicion and cynicism to increase. Keep doing what you're doing. San Diego's school district offices, they're flying the Black Lives Matter flag. Keep doing that, you racist bigots. And then talk to me about how we're just not unified anymore. It's so bizarre. If you do want to overcome, then you'll start talking and discussing and teaching and reading about the shared human experiences that we all have. I'll give you an example. I was talking to a friend of mine on the radio. He's organizing this big blood drive because 6 years ago he was shot 6 times. And I don't even know how we got started. Oh, his dad just passed. His dad recently passed away. And I asked him about his dad, and he said, yeah, I woke up from my coma after a week, and the first thing I saw was my dad crying, and that was the first time I ever saw my dad cry. And then he started to break up, thinking about that and talking about that. In my Bible group 2 weeks ago, my men's group, that same thing came up. When was the first time you ever saw your dad cry? And everyone remembered it, which means it was a pretty important moment in your life. Why? What does that mean? What did you learn from it? How did it change you? Why do you think you still remember it? And if you're a dad, have you cried in front of your kids? Have you, or have you, why have you not, right? That's a human experience. Like that's something we all can talk about. Have you ever been betrayed? Have you ever experienced redemption, forgiveness? Tell me a story of someone who you love who's passed away. What's the hardest thing you've ever had to overcome? What are you anxious about? Everyone's anxious about something. What are you anxious about? If you talk about it, you'll be pretty amazed how a lot of us are anxious about the same things. You want to be united or not? If you do, you focus on the things we all share in this human experience. Because news alert, we're all humans. Or we can continue to go down this road, and I'll tell you exactly where it will end up. I got to take a break here. I don't want to rush this. But I want to play a video for you. It's the only logical end to where this leads. And you can see it in action. We'll play it next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Crusaders, MikeSlater.locals.com. Please join us over there and get off big tech. It's amazing. People are like, oh, big tech, they're the worst. I hate them. Big Silicon Valley. I'm just scrolling on Instagram. Oh, I hate big tech. They're the worst. They're following everything. They got our data. I wonder what's on my Facebook account. Get off it. MikeSlater.locals.com. Coming up at the end of the show, we're going to talk to Colleen O'Flynn. She is the woman who is the victim of the worst, most absurd cancellation yet. Ever is true, but I'm sure there will be more absurd to come. She got fired from her job as a literary agent just because she had a Parler and Gab account. That's it. She didn't tweet anything. I don't even want to say she didn't tweet anything controversial, because maybe that's subjective. She didn't tweet anything political at all. Just merely having a Parler and a Gab account. Crazy story. We'll talk with her coming up in just a little bit. I want to talk about where we go down, or where this road ends. And there's no other way it can go. If you want to keep going down the black separatist, critical race theory, white fragility road, there's no other turns that it can. This is it. This is the path. And I got an example of what it looks like. This is a New York City, Manhattan school committee meeting. So it's not the school board, but it's like a subgroup of the school, whatever. before we play the people freaking out about the offensive act, I want to show you the offensive act. Now, we're going to play a fun little game here. This is a community meeting on Zoom. This is from like July. Community meeting. So there's a bunch of different people zooming in, whatever. I'm going to show you like a minute. We're going to play a minute of this Zoom meeting. And I want to see if you can find the offensive act. All right? So look carefully. We're going to play 1 minute. Try to find the offensive thing that resulted in, as we'll also play in a second, total freak out. Like, you're the worst person in the world. You gotta resign. I can't believe it. Like, total freak out. Let's see if you can see what happened.
We've had incidents where they've stopped people entering the school with knives. They've protected our children. I haven't heard one incident in District 2 in a decade that I've been affiliated with children in this district where we had one issue. I'm a little bit shocked at this. They're part of the community. They're part of the PS33 community. When we attended there, they're part of Wagner, part of I don't know. I'm just a little shocked. I think we're branding them at
Did you catch it? Top screen. The guy there, his best friend was with him. She's black, and she handed him her nephew for all of 30 seconds. So he's on the screen. He's not talking. He's not the one talking. Best friend, who's black, hands him her nephew. He just sits on his knee for 30 seconds, and then he hands the kid back. This is what happened at the next meeting. Now, as we play this, again, this is the only logical end to what we're doing in our schools and what we're doing in our culture, and as we'll talk with our guest coming up at the end of the show, what we're doing in all of our businesses as well. This is the only logical end. This is a little sneak peek, a little crystal ball for what's coming for everyone. Here.
It hurts people when they see a white man bouncing a brown baby on their lap and they don't know the context. That is harmful. That makes people cry. It makes people log out of our meetings. They don't come here. They don't come to our meetings, and they give me a hard time because I'm not vocal enough, and I'm not trying to be a martyr. I'm trying to illustrate to you that you think you think I'm a social justice warrior, and you think I'm being patronizing, and I'm getting pressure for not being enough of an advocate. And I take that to heart, and that hurts me, and I have to learn to make how to be a better white person.
I would like
You
to know
don't have
before
people
this meeting
telling you
adjourns.
that.
I would like to know before this meeting adjourns how having my friend's nephew on my lap was hurtful to people and was racist. Can you please explain?
Tom, I've explained it to you. You can Google, you can read a book. Read Ibram Kendi. Read white fragility. Read how to talk to white people. No, it's not my job to educate you. You're an educated white man,
right.
and you can read a book.
My friend is going to
yourself.
educate you, Robin. My friend will educate you.
I need to learn how to be a better white person. And then I think the part that stands out to me is when he asks why it was racist or what the problem is. You know what she came back with? Google it! Read a book! Read Ibram X. Kendi! Read all the same toxic poison that we're giving our kids in elementary school. And my favorite line of all, it's not my job to educate you. Can you believe that? So this is what you're gonna get, right? You're gonna do something completely opposite of racist. Like his best friend's black and holds the, you'd think it'd be racist if he didn't have, you know what I mean? Like the fact that he has a black, So he does something that's distinctly not racist. And you get attacked like that. And that was like, there's like a half an hour of that. And you're like, what's the problem? Oh, it's not my job to educate you. So you can just make accusations. And then that's your out. It's not my job. I'm so tired. That's what you get that a lot. I'm just so tired. I'm exhausted. Just to bring it back to schools, why would you give your kids over to these people? What have your kids done to you that's so bad that you punish them by handing them over to people like that? Because you are. You don't think you are. You think, oh, surely this isn't my kid's teacher. Surely my kid's teacher isn't like this. Yes, they are. Whether they want to be or not, they are. They have to embrace this woke stuff or they get fired. Let me back it up a second. You with me so far? So yesterday, really last week, we've talked about how you may feel out of control lately, like things are out of your control in this crazy world. And it's because we like to focus. It's a weird thing of human nature. We like to focus on things that are indeed out of our control. I don't know why we do that, right? But we do. Like we focus on DC, like the craziness in DC. Well, you can't really control that right now, right? But the things you can control, we tend to not. We got it backwards. Because the only way to feel better about this, and the only way to actually make a difference in your life and in DC, is to focus on the things that you can control. So on that theme, we shared a couple examples, a couple stories of this. So the first one, I think on Monday, we talked about Confucius. And Confucius saying, this is 500 BC, he said you got to run well-run, to have well-run empires, you need well-run states. And to have well-run states, you need well-run families. And to have well-run families, you need self-control. To have self-control, you need to rectify or purify your heart. And to purify your heart, you need to seek precise verbal definitions of your inarticulate thoughts. You need precise verbal definitions. So you need precise verbal definitions. That purifies your heart. That gets you self-control. That helps you run better families. That gives you a better neighborhood. That gives you a better country. Focusing on what's in your control. To me, I interpret that getting precise verbal definitions of your inarticulate thoughts. To me, that means, well, thinking deeply about things, thinking clearly about things, but also managing your inputs. Right? What am I bringing into my heart, my heart and my brain that I will then be thinking about, that I will then, right? So control your inputs, because that's in your control. Jordan Peterson, the way he put it, rule 6 is get your own house in perfect order before you criticize the world. So that was Confucius. And then that was on Monday. Tuesday, we talked about Alexander the Great and Telamon conquering the globe, or the known world, and then encountering these yogis in India. And the admiration that Alexander the Great and Telamon had for these, you're right, so Alexander the Great, this warrior, but the admiration that these two men had for these yogis. Telamon called these yogis the consummate warriors. He said, they haven't conquered the world, they've conquered the need to conquer the world. They're used to pain, they're oblivious to hardship, they take up their position at dawn and don't let go of it, no matter how hungry, tired, hot, cold they are, it doesn't matter. They're cheerful all the time, they're self-motivated, self-governed, self-commended. These are the ultimate warriors. Why? Because the yogis mastered the self. Things that are in their control. Douglas MacArthur wrote that poem to his son, Prayer for My Son, and one of the lines is, I pray for a son who will master himself before he seeks to master other men. You with me on the theme here, right? Let me take a break. I want to come back. I'll add one more story to that for the mix here. And cap it off with a guest who was fired for something completely out of her control, completely unjust, completely out of her control. But how has she found a way to focus on what still is in her control? It's all coming up. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, we're talking about not focusing on the things that are out of your control and instead focusing on the things that are in your control. Because when you focus on the things that are in your control, not only will you feel better, but you'll actually then make a difference on those things that are currently out of your control. Make sense? Let me add one more story to the mix. We've added a bunch already. Arjuna, one of the main characters in the epic Hindu poem Mahabharata. Mahabharata. It's something like 200,000 lines long. It is the Iliad and the Odyssey combined times 10. It's 10 times longer than the Iliad and the Odyssey. So I was just, I read it over the weekend and came across the story and I was like, oh, I was just gonna check. It was written around 400 BC. So Arjuna, his like power is he can shoot a bow and arrow, right, with both hands. He's like a crazy shot, right? So the god Krishna pointed to the other side of the battle line and he told Arjuna to slay the foe without mercy, all right? That was his battle order. You go across the battle lines and you are to slay the foe without mercy. Okay, get that visual for what that would look like. What does he mean? What does he mean by that? I think we all know what it means, right? Let me quote Stephen Pressfield, the brilliant Stephen Pressfield, author of Gates of Fire, which is about the Battle of Thermopylae, which, have you not read that yet? You must read Gates of Fire. Stephen Pressfield said that Krishna did not mean literal enemies. He did not mean attack them with spear and sword. He meant the enemies inside Arjuna's own head. Slay without mercy, fear, self-doubt, arrogance, complacency. And Pressfield goes on, he says, you don't need a gun to fight those things, but you need the warrior virtues, courage, patience, perseverance, the desire to embrace adversity, the capacity to embrace adversity. We need aggressiveness, killer instinct, love for our brothers and sisters. But you see, it's slaying the enemy within. It's Ephesians 6:12, right? Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, authorities, powers of the dark world, and against the spiritual forces of heaven, of evil in the heavenly realms, right? It's not each other. If everyone slayed the enemy within themselves first, so many of the issues that we have in our culture would disappear. So many. If you slayed the enemy within, so many issues that you have in your life, right? Like at your work, in your family, your friends, so many of those issues would disappear. And then, of course, culturally as well. The problem with, one of the many problems with the Black Lives Matter approach that we're seeing today is, and the black separatist and critical race theory and all this stuff. First of all, there's no such thing as redemption in this cult. There's no such thing as redemption. You white person, you're a sinner, always. Nothing you can do about it. But also they've weaponized empathy. They've weaponized it. So they'll say something like, hey, white people, you can never know what it's like to be black. You'll never understand. Instead of, hey, let's talk about the things that we have in common. Let's talk about the things that we share in, as we talked about in the first segment, the human experience. Because there's way more of those things. And they obviously far exceed the colors, the melanin in our skin. I'll give you an example of this. Finding unity. Van Jones has a show called The Redemption Project. And check out the premises, it's fantastic. He reunites people at San Quentin prison with their victims or with the victims' families, okay? So think of this. You got a guy who killed your wife and you sit 20 years ago and you're sitting across the table with him. There's a guy who killed your mother when you were 2 years old. There's a guy who shot you and you're paralyzed. The rest of your life, you're paralyzed. This total stranger, 20 years later, they've been in prison the whole time. And you've been suffering with this loss of part of your life or the most important person you know, you lost them. They took them. 20 years later now, you sit across the table and you talk to them. Whew. And here's what you realize. Here's what everyone realizes. They have one life, and it's spent behind bars. And you have one life. And it's no longer with your wife or your mother or your son because of this other person. So you're both experiencing a life that you'd rather not. If these two people can talk and come together and find unity in that experience, what the heck is wrong with us? So I watched this one episode, you've been seeing it in the corner there. It's a mom whose son was killed in a drug deal gone bad. So she was an addict, her son was an addict, and got murdered by that guy with all the tattoos on his face. Right? And they met. And at the end of their meeting, they committed to helping each other stay sober off of drugs. What? They end up hugging and crying in each other's embrace. What in the world are we doing? Messing around with this race nonsense. That is the true depth and connection and potential of connection with the human experience. It's a beautiful thing. And instead, we're wasting our time and destroying lives with this critical race nonsense. It's so bad. It's terrible. Just some silly examples here before we get to our next guest. San Francisco School District, they renamed 44 schools, including Lincoln and Washington, and Paul Revere. It was Paul Revere High School because Paul Revere fought against the Penobscot Indians. So he's against the indigenous peoples, but he didn't fight against the Penobscot Indians. I'm mispronouncing it, but he didn't fight against those Indians. He fought a naval battle in Penobscot Bay in Massachusetts against the British. The Indians weren't even involved, right? That's how stupid this whole thing is because he's racist now, gotta go. They also renamed the VAPA, the Visual and Performing Arts Department. Do you know why? Why do you think? Why do you think they renamed the Visual and Performing Arts Center VAPA? They used to call it VAPA. Why did they change it? Here, do we have the clip, guys? Go ahead, listen to the guy at the school board.
In a memo, he explains that acronyms are a symptom of white supremacy culture.
The use of so many acronyms within the educational field oftentimes tends to alienate those who maybe don't speak English to understand those acronyms.
That's based on a 1999 paper written by author Tema Okun titled White Supremacy Culture. Okun told me that our culture perpetuates racism when things continue to be written down in a certain way.
Yet the San Francisco Unified School District uses so many acronyms on a daily basis that if you go to their website, there's a section that tells you how to find out what their acronyms or abbreviations mean.
So VAPA is now called the SFUSD Arts Department. Now, you may be wondering, isn't SFUSD also an acronym? San Francisco Unified School District? You would be right. But don't worry about that. That person right there got a ton of woke points for even thinking that this could possibly be racist. And then finally, a San Francisco teacher, former Berkeley professor, she wrote in the San Francisco Chronicle an article about Bernie Sanders' mittens and how Bernie Sanders' mittens are a sign of white supremacy. And her argument is, like it matters, that a person of color or low income, a person without privilege, would never be able to wear mittens like that to the inauguration. So because he can, he's a white supremacist or whatever. Like, listen, I don't know how much else we need to prove about this. Everything's racist if you want it to be, okay? And you're dropping your kids off at a school that they're being taught that everything is racist. So we can cut it out with this nonsense that divides us, or we can focus on the things that truly do unite us as fellow human beings. Coming up next, the most absurd of all the cancel culture, the cancellations ever. We're gonna talk with her next. True story, Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. Last week we shared what I think is the worst cancel story of all of them. And every day there's like a dozen of them. And I truly believe this is the worst of them all because the person who was canceled didn't even do anything. You couldn't even pretend that the person did so. Here's the quick of the story here. Colleen Offline, she's a literary agent. And she has a Twitter account. She also has a Gab and a Parler account. Some random anonymous nobody tweeted her employer and said, hey, do you know that one of your literary agents has a Gab and Parler account? They frequent alt-right social media. And that was it. That was enough. The head of the agency tweeted out, which is like a weird thing to even do, that they like proudly proclaimed that they fired this person for just having an account. We do not condone this activity, and we apologize to anyone who's been affected by this. And I just look at that, you're like, well, by what? Colleen Offline is here. Colleen, how are you today?
Good morning, Mike. I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. No, thank you for being here. So did I get any of the backstory incorrect? Fill in any gaps, please.
As far as I know, that's correct. I don't know any more than that. But yeah, that's about what happened. I created a Parler account, and when Parler went under, I found out about Gab, and I was just looking for an alternative to Twitter. I created a Gab account and literally posted the same exact content that I had posted on Twitter. And by the way, this was, the Parler account was months ago, and the Gab account was weeks ago. And yeah, so it was a little bit of a perplexing surprise when all this happened.
So whenever I hear a story like this, for instance, there's some influencer on Instagram who Sephora canceled, and people make a big deal about it, whatever. And I'm like, well, she maybe said something that was kind of offensive. So I went back and she said some things that, maybe I agree with, but it's like, okay, I can kind of see. So I thought the same thing about your story, Colleen. I was like, well, maybe there's got to be something else here, right? Maybe Colleen tweeted out who knows, something pretty offensive. And I scrolled through your Twitter. Have you ever tweeted anything political even?
Never. No. No, I tell people where to put their apostrophes, and I maybe once in a while give a tip about writing with the subjunctive mood, but it's all just writing tips and, funny animal memes and just things that make me giggle. And yeah, I'm not interested in politics at all. And I don't live on social media, and I don't tweet about politics on social media at all.
Nothing. No Trump memes. No.
Nope.
You're not a white supremacist, are you, Colleen? We need to clear that up as well. That is wild. So not even any political things at all.
No.
Merely having a Gab account. So why did you want to move away from Twitter in the first place, though?
Well, I found Twitter a little difficult to use, honestly. I have an older computer, and I was just having trouble, and I was getting frustrated. And also, I found that there was a lot of vehemency and a lot of negative things on Twitter, and I just didn't like it. And it would just pop up in my face, and I didn't like that at all. And so I was thinking, well, maybe I can find something else that's not so, that doesn't put things in your face that you don't want to see. And so, I was just trying some different platforms out. I'm not a tech wizard. I'm not a genius. And I don't live on social media. So I don't really know what else was out there. So, just kind of testing the waters. That's all.
That's one of the reasons why we've moved away from Twitter as well. The word we use is bombard. You're bombarded every time you go on Twitter and by the algorithm. And you're like, what is this stuff? I don't even. So what have you found on Gab? On your short amount of time on Gab, did you find that so wildly offensive that you thought you may be fired for merely having an account on it?
No, I created my account on Gab, and I was able to post the same tweet that I had pinned on Twitter, and then I wasn't able to log in again. I don't know what happened, but like I said, I'm not a tech genius, but I just couldn't even log into my account, so I just kind of put that aside, and was like, maybe I'll figure it out some other day. But yeah, I didn't really spend any time there at all. So I don't
And
even know.
Fired because of it, Colleen. You got fired.
Yeah.
So who is YA Whispers? Who's this anonymous person?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Wow. Is the YA young adult? I asked that because I understand there's like a weird, like, I don't know, I want to put that. There's a progressive like circle inside the young adult literature genre on Twitter that I've like heard about. Do you think this is some like super woke young adult activist, or what's going on?
I have no idea. And I hate to speculate on anything or anybody's motives or who anybody could be, because I just don't know. I do know that there are a lot of authors and agents and editors that will go on Twitter and tweet really hateful things sometimes. And it's not just in the young adult arena. It's kind of, as far as I can tell, it's everywhere. It's peppered. So, but I don't know. I don't know who anybody is. I just don't.
And they have 2,000 followers,
sorry.
and they're no. That's the point. They have 2,000 followers. They're an anonymous nobody, and they took your job away from you. So tell me what happened with your boss. What did they tell you about what happened? Because they told the world on Twitter, which is odd.
Right, which I've heard, but I never really saw the tweets. So I woke up on Monday morning, the 25th, and with an email in my inbox, and I think it was timestamped around 4:30 a.m. or 5 a.m., and just a very brief email that said from my boss that I had created a Parler and Gab account, which that was never a secret. I posted on Twitter that I had created those, and that there was a lot of negative backlash for that towards the agency, and that since I was engaging in political activities, she called it political activities, that we had to part ways. And that was that. And I never heard anything else from her. Nothing, not a word.
Still now.
Still, yeah.
What's interesting is a lot. They've had a lot of criticism. Do you know if there's any more than just this one Twitter account? I don't know. Do you mean for the agency? A lot
or
of you said the agency has received a lot of criticism. I reckon it's just that one.
I have no idea, because like I said, I don't live on Twitter. I don't read a lot. I haven't really been back since Monday. And I have no idea.
She said the Jennifer whatever literary agency has in the past and will continue to ensure a voice of unity, equality, and one that is on the side of social justice. As of this morning, she said your name, is no longer an agent at this literary agency. Are you not a voice of unity, equality, and on the side of social justice, or like what's the deal?
I was just a literary agent. I wasn't a political activist, so I don't. I mean, what I would gather from that is that she would like political activists, I think. I don't know. I don't know. See, I'm trying to interpret, but I just don't know.
You seem like you're in good spirits, Colleen, for having lost your job and all. How are you working through this?
Well, I don't sweat the little things really, Mike, and it's there's so much else to get out of life, and I have a great life. I have a great support system. I have a great family. I have great faith, and that's for me, that's enough. And everything else it can come and go, and it's kind of just otherwise noise. Do you know what I mean? The bad things in my life, I'm glad whenever they're gone. And this seemed like it might have been one of those bad things that I didn't need in my life.
Which is what's that? What's that bad thing that you didn't need?
Just that job with that agency. Yeah.
Yeah, what a great way of looking at it. Because you could be a victim of an unjust, well, you are still, but you could wallow in your victimhood of unjust, etc. But instead, you're taking it as the pruning of the branches.
It really is. And the other thing is I've received upwards of 1,000 notes from other authors, other agents, even a couple editors in the industry, and thanking me for speaking out and sending me notes of support, and also telling me that they're afraid. They're afraid because they maybe don't always vote Democrat, or they also had a Parler account, or maybe they go to church, and they're afraid that if somebody on Twitter, like an anonymous Twitter account, finds this out about them, that they will lose their jobs, or their books will be canceled or pulled off the shelves, or their publications will be, their contracts will be terminated. And they're afraid to say anything publicly, but they wanted to reach out and tell me that they were grateful that I was bringing some of this to light.
Do you see us going down that road?
I think we're already on that road.
Yeah, how can we not be with your story, right? I feel like as we look back on the timeline of like it gets more absurd and absurd and absurd. Like, I hate to say it, but like you're definitely one of those stepping stones, because you literally didn't do anything.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's another reason it's hard to be upset about that. And I'm not a bitter person. I've never been one to hold a grudge or be vindictive or anything. It's just not worth the time and the energy to me. But I do feel the need to really shine a light on what's going on.
Why? What do you want me to get out of it?
I guess I would hope that what I would really like to see, and maybe I'm just naive, but it feels like a lot of people are forgetting that if you're intelligent and you have a good heart, that you can have different opinions than somebody else on religion. You can have different opinions on politics, and we can all still get along, and we can all still like each other and talk to each other, and we can still find value in each other's work. And it feels like that's kind of gone away in the publishing industry, that you're not really worth anything unless you're leaning politically to the left publicly. And to me, that feels a little chilling and a little scary.
Yes. My last question for you, Colleen, and I'm so grateful you're here. Your one tweet that you've sent after all this is, well, thanks, Twitter and your former employer. I just got fired because I'm a Christian and a conservative. How has your faith helped you through this moment?
Immensely. I mean, what else do we have, right? That's one thing that nobody can ever take away from us. It's just comfort. It's that knowing deep down that I'm doing the right thing, and that somebody big has got my back.
I'd say. Colleen, I'm inspired and I'm grateful. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you for sharing your story. Wonderful. Colleen O'Fline. I would give you her accounts, but she hasn't anymore. Wow, that's insane. Tomorrow is our special. We're talking about the future of the Republican Party, what it should look like, how it should embrace populism or not, pros and cons of that, and principles and policies moving forward. That's our special tomorrow. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word.